So back in 1956, a little game named Yahtzee made its way onto store shelves and quickly became the world's first commercially successful roll and write game. And since that time, a steady stream of newer games have also found success, reinventing many of the basic concepts of rolling a set of dice and scoring your chosen results in a variety of unique and interesting ways. However, in just the last few years alone, roll and writes have had a major resurgence in the hobby industry, with a number of incredibly well-received games that have really captured the attention of gamers everywhere. And today, almost everywhere that you look, designers and publishers are still finding new ways to inject their creative talents into some really cool projects, despite what has arguably become one of the industry's more crowded genres of games. And because of this, it's become increasingly more challenging for gamers like us to find the games that are truly innovative. Well, hopefully today, I'm going to make things a little bit easier on you because I'll be taking a look at this 1 to 4 player game, which in my opinion is really one of the most clever roll and write games that I've ever had the chance to play. So please sit back and relax as I review Wizkids' newest roll and write game, Super Skill Pinball 4K. So let me start by being transparent about roll and write games in general. I own a small handful of them and enjoy playing the ones that are in my collection, but as I alluded to at the start, I've grown increasingly more skeptical of this entire genre of games because of just how many new releases and announcements that there are every single month. And with roll and writes being the new big craze, it's completely understandable that publishers are using their current set of IPs and their catalog of games as their inroads to potentially capitalizing on this huge wave of popularity. However, at the end of the day, no matter how many of these games that I play, there always tends to be a pretty substantial gap between those games that are great and those games that are just, I don't know, feel like they were released just so that companies can say that they have a roll and write game on the store shelves. And I know that sounds harsh, but for every fantastic game, there are literally dozens of others that don't need to exist at all. So I find myself constantly playing through several of these games looking for those rare gems that stand out. And I have to admit, in the world of roll and writes, Super Skill Pinball does about everything that it can to distinguish itself from everything else that you've played before. First, if it wasn't already obvious, it's an analog pinball game, something that the board game industry most definitely has not seen a lot of. Second, it's also a pinball game with no connected intellectual properties attached to it. No Star Wars, no Lord of the Rings, no Mage Knight, nothing. Meaning that it will most assuredly succeed or fail based solely on how well it connects with people's imaginations and the gameplay alone. And finally, third, it attempts to do what so many other board games with a very specific theme aspire to do, but oftentimes fail. And that's the ability to take the subject matter for which the game was designed to represent and translate over that experience to the players through its presentation and its gameplay. And remarkably, Super Skill Pinball does everything extremely well, delivering on all three of these different things. Alright, so the game itself is comprised of 4 very different and unique playing pinball tables. They're matching back glass, 2 pinballs, and a dry erase marker for each of the players. And over the course of 3 rounds, or 3 pinballs, players are going to try to score the most points possible by using the result of rolled dice to bounce their pinball into bumpers and flippers and spinners and drop targets and all the other things that you would typically associate with a pinball table, in hopes of keeping their ball in play for as long as possible. And through this process, players will be marking off boxes on their boards on each turn by hitting very specific combinations of targets that can eventually activate special abilities, scoring them massive amounts of points before they inevitably lose their ball, reset their board, and try for it all over again. And like real pinball itself, players' rounds will only conclude when they either tilt their pinball table, lose their ball to one of the table's 2 outlanes, or by not having an available target to cross off or a flipper box on hand that can return their pinball to the top of their table. Speaking of the boards, there are 4 very unique pinball tables in this game: Carnival, Cyber Hack, Dragon Slayer, and finally Dance Fever, each of which provides varying degrees of difficulty, challenges, and bonuses for the players to explore, but all functionally operating under the same basic set of rules. So in a nutshell, each of the 4 tables is broken down to 4 or 5 horizontally stacked zones, with each zone containing some unique feature of the pinball table itself. More importantly though, is that these zones also mimic the physics of a real pinball table, meaning that on each turn, players' pinballs must actually travel down to a lower zone due to the slant of the table itself. And speaking of zones, each are packed with some really cool targets that need to be filled in depending upon the player's ability to match the values of any of the available boxes with one of the 2 rolled dice. And in this game, all the players will be taking these actions simultaneously, so there is literally no downtime for players to have to wait through at all. But the real strength of this game is really just how well it captures the pure essence of playing pinball by taking things like flippers and spinners and multi-balls and skill shots and even nudging the table and possibly tilting and making those things not only an integral part of the game, but also incredibly fun to play at the same time. And that's really the main thing at work here. This game is just really fun to play, and in my opinion, that enjoyment can really be attributed to 2 very specific things. First, as I already mentioned, its ability to so perfectly imitate the joy of playing pinball. But probably more important to me is second, its ability to use those mechanisms in a way that allow for players to pull off some incredibly cool point scoring combinations on their board, scoring an enormous amount of points by activating multipliers and skill shots, and even managing 2 pinballs at once using multi-ball bonuses. It's just really satisfying as a player to continually find new ways to keep your ball in play for as long as possible so that every shot can take advantage of those triggered multipliers before that ball goes away. And with 4 very different playing boards to choose from, I can guarantee you that gamers of all types and ages are really going to enjoy exploring the creativity and the craftsmanship that's found on each of these pinball tables, as all 4 have tremendous amount of artistry and knack for capturing the table's theme and bringing it to life with its mechanisms that are both different than the other boards but also incredibly fun to play. And all of these things together really just immerse you as a player, almost as if you were actually sitting in front of your own table trying to skillfully bounce your pinball into just the right slots. But that experience does have a few minor drawbacks as well. And these are really the 2 things that I would see gamers having the most frustration with the game. First is the degree of luck that is almost always inherent with these types of games, and although it's just part of the experience, gamers might get a little frustrated to see their opponent always coming up with the right combination of dice that keep their pinballs on the table, as they instead lose theirs because they just found a different path and don't have the available targets or flippers that may save their ball from being lost. Which leads me to probably the biggest concern that I would have for those who are interested in this game, and it's directly connected to the overall pacing of the game. As I already mentioned, every action in Super Skill Pinball is done simultaneously, meaning that players roll the dice and they choose a single die to carry out their action each turn, and that's fantastic because it keeps the game moving at a very brisk pace. However, every game that I've played thus far has resulted in players dropping out at various times due to losing their 3rd and final pinball, meaning that someone is going to absolutely go crazy on their board and maximize as many shots as possible, which for that player is incredibly fun to play out. It also means, however, that sometimes a player could still be on their 2nd ball by the time that everyone else has completely dropped out of the game. And that's probably my biggest gripe with Super Skill Pinball. While everyone else at the table has probably gotten up to go get drinks or snacks, while I'm still sitting there for another 10 to 15 minutes, scoring an insane amount of points that no one will be able to come close to beating. And in all honesty, that's really kind of up for you to decide if that's something that would bother you. For me, I find it slightly annoying that in some of the games that we've played, none of the other players can eclipse the score of a single player who is still sitting there for 15 minutes, still playing the same game while everyone else has long finished. Having said that though, I still find this game incredibly fascinating. I find it very fun to play and 100% unique, and probably one of the best implementations of theme and function in Roll and Writes today. So, have you had the chance to play Super Skill Pinball 4K? If you have, please leave your comments below. Let me know if you agree or disagree with my review. And as always, thanks for watching. Hey everyone, if you enjoyed this video, please consider dinging the bell below. That's going to notify you of all the new videos that are uploaded to our channel. Give us a big ol' thumbs up, subscribe, and as always, consider watching all of our other videos on the channel, one of which is right here to my left.